Welcome everyone to Things Around 8. Dear friends, in this video, we will talk about a statement by Volodymyr Zelensky who said that he had proved in Kursk that all Russian threats are nothing more than a bluff, and that the West should not be afraid of releasing the Ukrainians to attack Russia with all the weapons at their disposal. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news. When Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine on February 24, 2022, his objective was very clear: to demonstrate a huge offensive force represented by hundreds of ballistic and cruise missiles, hitting and destroying Ukrainian air bases, radars and command and communication centers, and mainly, by a force estimated at almost 200,000 soldiers attacking simultaneously from the north, northeast, east and south. With such a large force involved, Putin believed that he would be able to achieve his main strategic objectives within a few days or weeks, while simultaneously undermining the will and willingness of the Ukrainian people to defend themselves. However, within a few weeks, it became clear to Putin that his war was not going according to plan, forcing him to adapt, which involved withdrawing 40,000 Russian troops who had entered northern Ukraine from Belarus with the mission of encircling and conquering the country's capital, Kiev. With those forces withdrawn, Putin could focus on more easily achievable objectives, such as conquering all of Donbass and consolidating Russian control over southern Ukraine, including the Sea of Azov. In April 2022, with the war in its second month, Western allies, led by the United States and the United Kingdom, entered full force in supporting Ukraine defensively, mainly through the supply of portable anti-tank weapons, essential to holding back the gigantic Russian fleet of armored vehicles that Putin was launching into the war. At that moment, Putin realized that not only had he failed to break the Ukrainian spirit and will to defend itself, but he had also drawn into the war the entire industrial and logistical power of the United States and some NATO member countries, which gradually began sending increasingly lethal and advanced weapons to Ukraine. Faced with this situation, Putin and other top members of his regime, such as former President Dmitry Medvedev, reinforced the practice that Russia has always known how to do best. They began to shout, kick, and above all, threaten. Medvedev was responsible for the nuclear threats, with the former Russian leader making, since the beginning of the war, more than 30 threats of nuclear attack, some against Ukraine and others against the United States and European allies, especially England, with Putin being responsible for more veiled and discreet threats, but still very aggressive. This included the so-called Red Lines, actions that, if carried out by Ukrainian allies, would give Russia the justification to carry out even more terrible attacks, including Medvedev's nuclear strikes. Since the beginning of the war, Putin has drawn many red lines, the first involving the supply of the HIMARS, a high-precision, high-range multiple rocket launcher capable of hitting targets up to 90 kilometers away. The supply of this type of weapon to Ukraine, which began in June and July 2022, was met with fury by Russia, which accused the West of crossing a dangerous red line. However, as we know, the Russians continued with their usual invasion. Terrible, of course, but without any new chapter involving new weapons or tactics. Another important red line drawn by Putin was the supply of long-range air defenses. At the beginning of the war, Ukraine's allies limited themselves to sending point-based air defenses, such as manpads, individual launchers that are very lethal against small aircraft, such as helicopters and ground attack planes, but useless against bombers, ballistic missiles, and planes flying at very high altitudes. As a result, Russia adapted its strategy in Ukraine, prioritizing high-altitude air strikes or missile strikes, with the Russians destroying, in the winter of 2022 and 2023, a large part of Ukraine's electrical and civil heating grid through such attacks. But this began to change early in 2023, with the Allies sending the first long-range defenses, most notably the Patriot, the only defense capable of intercepting Putin's hypersonic ballistic missiles. As we know, this red line was crossed, and even so, Russia did nothing of what it threatened to do. Another important red line drawn by Putin was against the supply of Western heavy armored vehicles, with Putin saying textually that if armored vehicles such as the American Abrams, the British Challenger 2 and the German Leopard 2 were sent to Ukraine, it would be confirmation that NATO had directly entered the war, and that Russia could therefore attack member countries. However, as we know, the armored vehicles arrived, were and continue to be used, the red line was crossed and Putin did nothing of what he threatened. Another red line that is very important to highlight involves carrying out attacks against Crimea. According to the Kremlin, Crimea, which was invaded and illegally annexed in 2014, is fully Russian territory, and therefore any attack against this territory will be seen as a direct attack against Russia, giving the Russians the right to respond with even greater force and lethality. However, as we know, Crimea and the important bridge that connects it to Russia have been and continue to be attacked. The Crimean bridge was partially destroyed, closing it to road and rail traffic for several months. And even the headquarters of the important Russian Black Sea Fleet was destroyed in a precision strike by Western long-range missiles. But even so, Russia has not done anything that it threatened to do. And finally, we must not forget the red line drawn by Putin regarding the supply of fighter jets. According to the Kremlin, if fighter jets like the F-16 are used by Ukraine, it will be further evidence of direct Western participation in that war, which would give Russia the right to directly attack the countries that are supplying these fighters. However, as we know, F-16 fighters are already flying and are already participating in offensive operations in Ukraine. But Russia has not done anything that it has threatened to do, and on August 6, 2024, Ukraine violated what was seen as Russia's largest and most important red line by effectively invading Russia, with thousands of Ukrainian soldiers invading Kursk, occupying and controlling about 1,250 square kilometers and more than 90 Russian villages and cities. According to Putin and Medvedev, if Russia were invaded, the Russians would have every justification to use nuclear weapons. However, despite the Ukrainian invasion of Russia, Putin has done nothing of what he threatened to do, according to a recent statement made by President Zelensky. All this only confirms what he has been saying for months. The red lines drawn by Putin are nothing more than a bluff, and that, therefore, the West should free Ukraine to use all the weapons it has received to attack Russia, where it is most needed. That is, in the Russian bases in the rear from where the bombers take off and where the soldiers who are attacking and invading Ukraine are trained and prepared. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any news.